of the base for the wall sheets. This can be easily accomplished with a plumb line. Avoid setting base angle inside concrete edge. Otherwise, panel dimples can occur when fasteners are driven. Upon completion, the skeletal structural steel should include all primary and secondary framing with all flange braces, rod bracing, girts, purlins, support angles, sag rods, and other miscellaneous structural components in place. A final alignment check should be made before sheeting begins to see that all member structures are plumb and aligned properly. Once the panels are installed, it is difficult to correct any structural steel alignment problems without removing or damaging the sheeting. Give the structural steel a final connection inspection to ensure all bolts are in place and properly tightened. Bolt grades and tightening procedures vary from connection types. The primary high-strength A325 or 490 bolts must be tightened according to specific procedures, while secondary bolts are not. The builder must be thoroughly familiar with each. He must also be aware of the connection inspection procedures stated in the specifications and the material and procedural requirements called for on the erection drawings. It's a good practice to initial all completed connections. This way, a temporarily incomplete connection will not go unnoticed. A check should also be made to ensure that there are no damaged members which could require removal of the sheeting to repair. Some damage may be considered superficial without effect to structural integrity. When in doubt, consult with the manufacturer. Modifications should not be made to any structural members that are damaged or do not fit without approval from the proper authorities. Sheeting and trim, Section 6. The owner's acceptance of any building depends on its finished appearance. Sheeting, trim, and accessories are the most conspicuous elements of construction. They must be installed with the greatest of care. Just as with structural steel erection, the crew should go over the manufacturer's detailed installation prints before sheeting begins. This will ensure proper and efficient installation of panels and trim and minimize the probability of most common errors. The tools, materials, and techniques of proper sheeting and trim installation are simple. By meticulously following manufacturer installation instructions, the builder can avoid unnecessary and expensive callbacks. It is strongly recommended that the wall sheeting be installed first. Wall panels lend a high degree of rigidity to an incomplete structure. Before the first wall panel can be installed, the base condition must be in place. Purlins can be aligned with a sag angle or blocked. Girts, especially those spanning wide bays and wings, have a tendency to sag. To align, it is recommended that the erector shore them up with wood struts. With some panel profiles, fasteners form a very visible pattern down the length of a building wall. It is important to the building's appearance that straight screw patterns be maintained throughout the visible length of a wall surface. A quality appearance can be obtained by pre-drilling the wall panels. This method consists of stacking sufficient panels in a pile for a single bay. Pilot holes are then drilled through the entire stack in one operation. Pre-drilling does more than assure correct alignment. It saves time in fastening since only the girt material must be penetrated. The hole in the panel acts as a pilot for the fastener as it starts to drill. Pre-drilling is also a deterrent to driving the fasteners through the panel and missing the girt. Before drilling the aligned stacks of panels, measure the girt spacings. Start at the top of the base flashing and measure the distances to the center of the exposed faces of the girts. These spaces should be constant for the entire visible wall surface. Then, drill a test sheet and check for proper alignment before drilling an entire stack. The test sheet will be your template. When aligning panels for pre-drilling, don't slide them in the stack. Lift them to avoid scratching the finished surface. The drill size should be slightly larger than the fastener thread diameter. Pre-drill only those panels you expect to erect that day. Be sure to remove the drill filings within the stack, which can discolor or stain the finish. Wall panel installation should begin at the end of the building farthest from the point of maximum sight exposure, progressing toward the prevailing view. Thus, the shadow of the panel lap joint will not be apparent when viewed from this perspective. Blanket insulation and sheeting should be installed simultaneously. Start at one corner of the building with a roll of insulation wider than the sheet width. Insulation should wrap around the corner of the building and extend beyond the lapping edge of the steel panel. This insulates the corners of the building and also moves the insulation joint beyond the point of the metal panel lap. Temporarily secure the insulation and smooth out the facing wrinkles prior to fastening the panel. Be careful not to stretch fiber blankets too tightly. This will compress it and reduce its thermal performance. Trim the insulation to length before installing the wall panels in order to avoid an inadvertent water wick. Each successive roll of insulation should maintain the same amount of panel overlap. When joining successive rolls, pull the tabs evenly outward and glue or staple the tabs together. When stapling, fold the tab over and staple again between the first row of staples. To help maintain the integrity of the vapor retarder, tape the joint when specified and repair any facing punctures or tears. Condensation is the biggest obstacle to achieving maximum thermal performance. MBMA has published a condensation fact sheet to help you understand and control this potentially costly problem. Always install the insulation with the facing toward the warm side or interior of the building. There are many insulation options other than blanket available to owners today. Each system should be independently evaluated with respect to its in-place economic value and its overall system compatibility. Precise vertical alignment of each installed sheet must be maintained prior to final fastening. Misalignment of one panel will cause progressive problems throughout the remainder of the sheeted surface. When erecting wall panel, mark panel width modules at the top and bottom of the fastening base. This helps maintain panel dimension as each sheet is installed. With long panel lengths, it will be necessary to measure coverage at the middle also. The end wall panels may have to be field cut or backlapped to fit. Many times, end wall panels must be field mitered. Careful layout, especially on steep slopes, will ensure against panel gaps and sawtoothing. Panel fasteners should be installed in strict accordance with the project drawings. After the wall sheets are secured in each bay, the wood girt shoring may be removed. As the wall fasteners penetrate the girts, even when pre-drilling panel stacks, small steel shavings are often scattered onto the panel surface. These particles are magnetized and adhere to the wall surface. If they are not removed, they will cause rust spots on the finish. These are difficult and time-consuming to remove. A quick wipe with a clean cloth at the time the fastener is driven will prevent this problem. Also, make sure that all drill filings on the base flashing are swept off at the end of each workday. The installation of the eave and rake trim flashings and closures closely follows or occurs simultaneously with the sheeting operation. Trim has an enormous impact upon the appearance of the completed building. Light gauge flashing and trim materials are extremely vulnerable to damage from mishandling. The builder's attitude toward quality is the biggest factor in determining the finished appearance of a structure. If the trim is not true, it detracts from rather than enhances the final appearance. The use of string lines, module markings, or line of sight and qualified personnel is always good insurance. Trim, flashings, and closures are usually fastened with sheet metal screws or pop rivets and sealed as indicated by the project drawings. Don't pass up the opportunity to pre-assemble as much trim as possible on the ground. As with the structural steel, your efficiency can be greatly increased by assembling as many pieces of trim as possible on the ground. But don't do more than can be safely handled without risk of buckling. If electrostatic wrap is used, it should be removed from the trim and flashings immediately. If it bakes in the sun too long, it becomes extremely difficult to remove and increases the possibility of damage to the finish. Sheeting the roof is the single most important function in the erection of a structure. The roof must protect the building interior for many years. Yet it's claimed that leaking roofs represent more than half of all recorded construction claims. Proper care in layout, handling, and installation of roofing materials should be demanded of all crew members. As with the walls, roof sheets and insulation are installed simultaneously. The starter roll of insulation should again be wider than the starter sheet width. This overlap should be maintained throughout the length of the panel run to keep the insulation seams ahead of the lap joints. The ceiling tabs should be stapled or glued using the methods previously described. Sheet width increments should be laid out and marked for the entire run of roof panels. This will keep all sheet placements in alignment. All sheets should be positioned as indicated by the project drawings. Manufacturer instructions for the installation of eave, rake, and ridge details must be followed closely. Care must also be taken with the alignment of opposite slope panel ribs. This is especially true when working with handed panels. Proper alignment is mandatory for proper fit-up and integrity of the ridge condition. When possible, lay out the roof so that the lap joints are on the lee side of the most severe weather direction. This will reduce the possibility of a